Hi there, and welcome along to the first episode of a brand new season of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, the totally free and independent Rangers podcast that is made by fans for fans and where the content is always absolutely free. As it's starting the new season, if you're joining us for the first time, then a very, very warm welcome to you. Please do be aware that it's not just the podcast that we have here at Gersnet, but if you head over to the website at www.gersnet.co.uk, there's a whole host of other content there, including articles, social media, a history archive, and of course the very, very friendly discussion forum as well. The podcast, last time we checked, was approaching 4,500 subscribers. So if you're one of them, then thank you very, very much for getting us to that milestone. And hopefully in the coming weeks, we can take that over into the 5,000 mark. If you're not yet a subscriber, please do hit the subscribe button, hit like, and maybe leave us a wee comment as well. It really does help us to grow the show. If you're joining us live, it's just gone 9:33 on Sunday, the 18th of July. So if you're joining us live, then thank you very, very much for giving up your Sunday evening. Please do get involved in the show by leaving us your comments and your questions there in the chat. Otherwise, the show is always available to download or stream after the live broadcast. That's downloadable from wherever you get your normal podcasts: Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, Spotify, and that's available every Monday morning. What are we going to be talking about today? Well, there's a huge amount of information for us to get through as we try and rattle off everything that's happened since we wrapped up the title a couple of months ago, all the way through pre-season up to today. We'll be looking at the signings that have been made, the sort of links that we've had to some other players, as well as looking at the pre-season friendlies that we've had so far, and maybe a little bit of ring rustiness amongst the squad. Speaking of ring rustiness, my first guest this afternoon, Mr. Colin Armstrong. Colin, how are you?
Talking about my rusty ring again, Ross, dearie me. That's a great way to get the season off and running. Yes, thank you. I'm fine. How are you? Do you have a nice summer?
Very good, very good. I tell you what, it is warm in London today. Got in the car earlier, it said 32 on the dashboard, which was a wee bit much for me. No,
it's only 25 up here.
Only 25. You've been only 25 for a while.
Oh dear.
No, so what have you been spending your summer doing? Did you catch much of the Euros?
I took the first week off for the Euros, actually. Yeah, so I watched a few games. I've had a couple of weeks off up there. So I was, as I said, saying before we came on air, I was down in Iain's neck of the woods for a wee break, buying records and all that kind of stuff, and sitting in the sun and drinking a few beers. And it wasn't a good time to be down there. It was a week that England beat Germany. So it was. I'm not a big Scotland fan, but there's something about the English national team that I find quite unlikable. So that was quite hard. A lot of obnoxious England fans kicking about. So but other than that, it was great.
Try living amongst it. Someone else who does live amongst it, much like myself, Iain Duff. Iain, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, very good, very good. How did you find being a Scotsman in England during a major tournament where they actually did quite well?
Yeah, it's tricky. It actually wasn't as bad as the World Cup, I thought, because I think the World Cup, when they got to the semi-final, nobody was expecting it at all. So it seemed to be even worse. This time, I just sort of put my head down and got on with it. So you get used to living with it.
You do. You see, I've lived here for 23 years now, right? And I think actually it's a Rangers podcast and we'll talk about Rangers for the majority of the show, I'm sure, but I feel that Gareth Southgate has brought a more likeable element to that squad, more likeable young players coming through. Has that maybe tempted you to buy a Three Lions shirt, Iain?
No, funnily enough. It's not. Well, it's never really been about the players, really, has it? That it's the pundits really that are the problem, more or less. The players are. No, there's never really been any problem. Some of the players have been a bit arrogant over the years, but but it's mainly just the general sort of punditry and the arrogance of that rubs people up the wrong way, I think, and that hasn't really changed much, to be honest. So that was no, it's not really been tempting to be perfect. Again, like Colin said, I'm not a massive Scotland fan, but it does stick in the throat a wee bit sometimes. But I've got two young kids. One of them doesn't support England. The other one isn't a massive football fan, but he's but if he does show any interest, he would be supporting England. So it's kind of difficult to.
Yeah. Well, we don't have to worry about that for a year. and because it's World Cup next year again, so we can all go back into hiding next time round. Speaking of English football, Colin, where else better to start with Rangers than Arsenal yesterday? So it was the visit of Arsenal, led by Mikel Arteta, obviously his first return to Ibrox since he left all those years ago, and a player who I think, splits opinion, let's say, amongst the Rangers support, in that he was obviously a very talented, very gifted player, but arguably couldn't wait to leave when better offers came along. That said, he was clearly excited to be back at Ibrox, brings a strong squad with him. And for me, an encouraging result, albeit we spent a lot of the game on the back foot. Now, given that we were missing 5, arguably 6 solid first-team choices, Colin, what did you make of the performance and the result yesterday?
Well, I have to one up and say I've not seen the game, Ross. I was at the Camelot game yesterday, so I've just basically been looking at stuff on YouTube and match reports and all that kind of thing. But certainly from what I've read, and I was looking at Steven Gerrard's sort of post-match interview as well. I mean, pre-season, it's really just about getting minutes in the legs, and the results aren't a major thing. I mean, I do think if you start suffering lots of defeats in friendlies, you can start to think, okay, what's going on here? But overall, it's just about getting minutes in the legs, getting the fitness up, getting guys up to a decent standard, blowing the cobwebs away from the summer, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, in that respect, I would say it seems to be going not too bad. I don't think there's any major issues to worry about. Obviously, there was the issue with the new signing, what's his name, the guy, he's got a heart condition or something at the moment.
Off a bar. Yeah,
so I mean that's concerning. But I mean, other than that, it seems that it's just ticking along, and it's the same every pre-season. I must admit, I struggle with pre-season. I don't really get right into it until the competitive stuff starts. So it'll be good to see. I think the draw's this week. I think it's on Tuesday. It's either tomorrow or Tuesday for the Champions League.
Tomorrow, aye.
Is it tomorrow? So yeah, and then we'll kick off next week. I think it's a Tuesday we kick off. So that's when it properly starts for me. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's good to see Arsenal. I mean, they're not a side that I particularly follow or anything like that, but they do have a strong connection with Rangers, and it's been back for a long time. So it's always good to see them at Ibrox. Good team. Mikel Arteta annoyed me at the time when he left the Rangers. He did have a look of a player that couldn't get away quick enough. I was at a semi-final against Hibs. It went to penalties and they beat us, and it was like Scott Brown, Kevin Thompson, that team, and he went off injured that night, and his application and his body language and everything at the time was pretty poor, I thought, but time's a great healer. I've got nothing against Arteta. I was quite glad to see him back at Ibrox yesterday. I wish him well in his career and all the rest. I fear for him this year. I think he could be one of those managers, if things don't go well early on, he might be under P. But I'm happy to see him back. Once a Ranger, always a Ranger, all that kind of stuff. So, it seems to be going well. And we'll come on to talk about the signings. I think, some of the signings look good, and, who we're looking at. So, yeah, it's all ticking along nicely.
Absolutely. Iain, we, as in the Rangers support, can at times be passionate. Well, we're always passionate, but can be critical. I think it is fair to say, if things aren't going well. And after, a result against Partick Thistle, which was a scrappy 1-0 win, a loss away at Tranmere. It's only pre-season, but do you think that, to a degree, we needed a good result against Arsenal to just make sure that the momentum keeps going, keep riding the crest of 55 and take some positive momentum into the new season?
I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of agreeing with Colin in the sense that the more important thing is players getting a run out and players getting back into the swing of things. But in saying that, if you think back to the pre-season last season, if memory serves, we had a really good pre-season. We started off, I think we went about, I can't remember how many games, but a whole load of games without conceding a goal, never mind losing a game, and that was including, good opposition in France in the pre-season tournament over there, and that helped to sort of build the momentum into the season, I think. So yeah, I mean, there is a case to say, okay, they're not important, the results don't matter, but if you do get the results and you do get the performances, it sort of starts that ball rolling and gets you a bit of momentum going into the season. But I mean, in saying that, I don't think Steven Gerrard would be necessarily bothered if we lost to, I mean, if we get hammered 5-0 by Arsenal, then obviously he's not going to be happy. And I'm sure if we lost 3-2, he wouldn't be happy. But I mean, overall, the bigger picture is the players getting the minutes, the new signings integrating with the rest of the team, and just trying out new things if new things need to be tried out. All these things are when you pre-seasons, when you do all that sort of stuff. So I mean, I don't think the results are that big a deal, but they do help with the momentum for the season. But overall, I think there's other things going on that are more important for the coaching team than the actual scorelines.
No, I completely agree with the both of you, and I think it's about fitness. I mean, we say it every time and try and temper expectations. It was the same to a degree with the Veolia trophy last year that you referenced there, Ian. Nice to win a piece of silverware, but it's about fitness. It's about testing yourself in competitive environments. And I think that actually Tranmere, as an opposition, probably a fairly good indicator of the level of football that we're likely to spend week in, week out playing against in the Scottish Premiership. That said, Ian, and as much as pre-season can be a wee bit of a damp squib sometimes, once we get past Blackpool on Wednesday, we have the visit of the illustrious Real Madrid coming to Ibrox. Pre-season or not pre-season, what does it mean that we can attract arguably the biggest name in world club football to come to Ibrox for a friendly?
Well, I mean, it's obviously good. I mean, I don't know how these friendlies work now. I mean, I know that generally speaking, I understand that clubs basically pay for them to come and play against you, and if you're willing to spend the money, then you get them to come. So, but from the fans' point of view, not that many fans are going to be able to get into the ground, whatever the final outcome of that is. But from the fans' point of view, that doesn't matter. The important thing is you're getting a massive name coming to play at Ibrox, and that's brilliant. We haven't played Real Madrid for I don't know how many years, 50 odd years, possibly more. So to see them at Ibrox even in a pre-season friendly is a good thing. Though I don't know what sort of team they'll bring with them. I presume they have to bring some of their bigger names with them as well. I suppose a lot of them will still be recovering from the Euros at the moment, so it may well be that they're a bit under strength, but nonetheless, even an under-strength Real Madrid is something to see. So that's good. It's good to get that level of name as well, because previous pre-seasons, it's all very well having the teams that are going to test you at a level you want to be tested at and build up your fitness. But sometimes it's just nice to get a big name in. Yeah,
absolutely. And arguably, that's something that we have been missing is pulling bigger names to Ibrox, and maybe not the last couple of years. I remember we had Marseille a couple of seasons ago, but before that there was definitely a barren spell whilst we were in the lower tiers. Colin, presumably you will not be
test you at a level you want to be tested at and build up your fitness, but sometimes it's just nice to get a big name.
It's one of those games. You would
absolutely, and arguably that's something that we have been missing.
I mean, as Ian says, they've not played Real Madrid since the 60s, I think. And they pumped us in. I think it was like 6-1 over there, wasn't it? And they beat us 1-0 at Ibrox. So I mean, I've seen Madrid. I was at the Champions League final when Zidane scored that goal at Hampden. So I mean, it's a team I've already seen, but I've never seen them at Ibrox. So it would have been good to go there, and it is good to get big names. I remember when the Chelsea game, the friendly we had against Chelsea. I mean, that for a friendly, the atmosphere at that was superb. It felt like we'd won like the British Cup that day, and
Siebo's glorious moment.
Honestly, it was what an atmosphere that day. It was brilliant. It was so you do get it every now and again for a friendly, and I think Madrid would have probably brought that, so it's just a shame it'll not be a full house, but I'm sure it'll be more than the 2,000 that were in yesterday, but it's still going to be nowhere near a full house, is it? So that's the only thing. But I mean, given it's the 150th anniversary, I think it was important to get a big name. For the centenary stuff, we had Arsenal and we had Ajax in it, and I think the Ajax game led to the formation of the Super Cup. You know what I mean? So, I mean that in itself is a good bit of history. So yeah, for the 150, I think it's important that we got a big name, and as you said earlier, there's fewer bigger than Real Madrid. So good to see them there, but just a shame that it'll not be a full house, and the majority will have to watch it on Rangers TV, my favourite channel, Ross.
Absolutely, your well-documented issues with Rangers TV last season.
Rangers TV, yeah, them in Premier Sports, top notch. Absolutely. Well,
look, I think that this issue of attendance and fan numbers will sort of skirted around the issue, and it is something that we need to really kind of dive into and assess the situation there. Just before we do that, a quick note that as part of the promotions for the pod coming back today and coming back for a new season, at Gersnet we're giving away a copy of Chris Jack's absolutely fantastic new book, Going for 55. I'm sure you know Chris, who's been a frequent guest appearance on the Gersnet podcast, and a wonderful new book that he's bringing out. To be in with a chance of winning that book, Going for 55, head over to the Gersnet social media pages, Frankie's Twitter feed, if that's easiest. All you need to do is follow the Gersnet Twitter feed, follow Chris's personal Twitter feed, and interact with that post there. All of the details are on Frankie's Twitter, and the winner will be picked on Friday. If you want any more information on that book, just head over to the website at polarispublishing.com. Right, Colin, sticking with yourself then. Fans, attendance, capacity, crowds, social distancing. Rangers put out a strange little video, I think it's fair to say, sort of advising on the return to football, with things like make sure you turn away if someone passes you and all of these things. So, look, the thing that gets me is that I'm a Formula One fan. Allegedly 230,000 fans went to Silverstone this weekend. We've seen the Euros passing without incident, if you excuse the behaviour of the England fans at the final. We've seen, tomorrow, in a matter of hours, restrictions down here in England are being effectively removed. And certainly football attendances will be back to normal. And the thing that frustrates me is that we will have had 2,000 fans at Ibrox yesterday. We'll have a full house at Bloomfield Road, at Blackpool on Wednesday. And then there's still a question mark over Sunday, which seems to be changing day to day. It could be as few as 2,000. It could be 20,000. It could be 25,000, somewhere in the middle. Nobody seems to know. Nobody really even seems to know the process by which we can apply to have more spectators. The baseline is 2,000, but the government say you can apply to your local authority to have more, but there's no application process. That all seems to be very, very woolly. So the frustration for me, let's say, is 2,000 on Saturday yesterday. Let's say 30,000 or however many Blackpool Stadium holds midweek, and then potentially back to 2,000 this coming weekend for Brighton and Real Madrid. What are your thoughts on the situation, and how do Rangers address that?
It's a tricky one, Ross. I think everyone's getting a bit. And not just the attendances, that just the general sort of restrictions around the COVID stuff. I think everyone's becoming a bit weary of them, and a lot of them contradict themselves, and there's a lack of consistency. And I think people in general are getting frustrated. But when it comes to the football, it's really frustrating. And given the sort of relationship that Rangers appear to have with the current administration, I think at least the supporters having feelings that we've been treated differently and all that kind of thing. But it does look like football in general is being treated differently, and it's because of that consistency thing. 16,500 at Murrayfield 3 weeks ago. You know what I mean? And they're allowed to queue for alcohol and all that kind of stuff. They get a beer, and it was just madness. And then someone put a good thing on Twitter. It was like a Google Map shot of Edinburgh, and you could see Murrayfield and you can see Tynecastle. Tynecastle's like half a mile down the road, and it's like Hearts have announced that they're allowed 500 in the stadium, whereas a week before there was 16,500 in Murrayfield. There's a half a mile difference. So it's stuff like that. It just makes you think, well, what's going on? You know what I mean? The Euros, 14,000 in at Hampden. It's Like at the end of the day, we're still in the middle. Well, not in the middle. We're hopefully coming out the other end of it now, with the vaccine and stuff like that. But it's still a serious time. People are still dying of this thing, and I think you have to try and think of that before you get too angry about things. But I just feel it's the consistency is puzzling. You know what I mean? And as you say, what doesn't help is you've got 4 devolved countries all doing their own thing. So Rangers can only get 2,000 at Ibrox. They go into Blackpool and they can do whatever they want. It's a full ground, and then they come back up the road and it's all different again. So, I mean, I understand the need and the desire from the current administration to be cautious as they're coming out of the COVID stuff, but it's just a lack of consistency. It just there doesn't seem to be. As you say, it's so woolly. There doesn't seem to be any sort of route map pointing to, well, this is where we are now and this is where we'll be in a couple of weeks. And there doesn't seem to be any science behind some of the decisions. No one can tell me there's science between 500 being allowed into Tynecastle and 14,500 being allowed into a stadium half a mile further down the road. I don't get that. And if anyone would want to come out and explain why, then that would help. The clarity would help. But it's frustrating, and given I was at the Camelin game on Saturday there, and it was the first competitive game of football I've been at since the Bayer Leverkusen game, and even then there was a bit of contradiction, because it was a glorious day yesterday, scorching, so quite a big gate, but they'd cut off half the ground that you couldn't. Right, they're saying you can't go down this bit. You're like, well, surely you want to use as much if you want people to socially distance. You want to use as much of the ground as possible, but they'd closed off one whole part, so everybody was sort of congregated at this one bit. So even then, even at that level, you're kind of thinking, well, what's the point in this? Surely that goes against.
I think one of the biggest, frustrations and things you look at and you think, where's the logic behind this? Is just looking at the pictures from Ibrox, where 2,000 people inside a stadium, 50,000.
And they're on the one stand.
People, one stand, so potentially, they could have spread them about even further if they wanted, but that stand is bigger than the majority of football grounds in Scotland on its own. And every other football ground in Scotland is allowed the same amount of people in it. Now, Rangers potentially could have had 4 stands with 2,000 people in it, and that would have been exactly the same social distancing situation if that's the criteria they're using. So, the idea that Ibrox can only hold 2,000 and Livingston Stadium can hold 2,000 just doesn't make sense. There's no logic to that whatsoever in my mind. And as you say, nobody's come out and explained, as far as I'm aware, the logic, the criteria, how they've come to this conclusion that 2,000 is the figure. So that is I'm uncomfortable with the idea that football stadiums at this stage would be full. I find it bizarre down here in England that stadiums are going to be full in a couple of weeks, because we're at the tail end hopefully of this, but the figures are still rocketing at the moment, especially among a lot of the people who will be going to football grounds. So I don't think we're at a point where we could just say, yeah, it's fine, well, let's open up and do what we like. But there's got to be some sort of middle ground there somewhere along the line. You can't just jump from 50,000 capacity down to 2,000. There's no logic at all to that in my mind. So unless they've got some other criteria that they're taking into account when they're doing it, in which case come out and say it. Otherwise, it just looks like typical, the political class in Scotland across the board don't have much time for football fans at all, and I think we're way down the priority list for doing things, unless there's obviously votes in it, which is when you're packing off 20,000 people to London when they shouldn't be going to London, then you just keep quiet about it. But that's another issue.
Well, I think the thing that hammers it home for me, am I right in thinking that in Scotland at the moment, it's 2,000 regardless of the size of your stadium, right?
Yeah.
So there were 2,000 at Ibrox watching Rangers versus Arsenal. At the same time, there were 2,000 at Dumbarton watching Rangers B team
Rangers Colts,
in that one stand. Yeah,
and another thing about that game as well is they banned away supporters. There was no away support allowed. Yeah, and you're just like, well, if there was away support, there was away supporters at Camelin yesterday. Camelin were playing Newton Grange Star. There was the people travelled through from from, that's sort of just on the outskirts of Edinburgh, innit? It's out by the bypass. There's people travelled a fair distance to come to that game. But at Dumbarton, they're not allowing away supporters in for the Rangers Scotland game. So again, there doesn't seem to be any clarity. There doesn't seem to be any strategy or sort of science behind that. It just seems to be a load of random stuff. And look, I agree with Ian. The thought of Ibrox being full and all football grounds being full at the moment seems a wee bit of a step too far. I think we still have to be quite cautious at the moment. However, I think more clarity is needed because, I mean, I've got a real chip on my shoulder with how football fans are treated. There is an argument to be made that it's a class thing, because football is traditionally a working class sport. If you're allowing 500 fans into Tynecastle and 14,500 fans into a stadium half a mile down the road, that is, there's no other way to say that looks like it's a class issue, that they trust rugby fans more than they trust football fans.
Yeah, but it's the alcohol debate as well, isn't it? You can. Well, I don't know in Scotland if you can get a drink in the stadium watching a rugby game, but you don't hear stories of rugby supporters buses getting stopped and that kind of thing. So, look, I completely agree. It's the lack of clarity. It's the fact that what are they called? Gretna 2008 FC, I think they're called now, will have 2,000, but Carlisle will have a full house 20 minutes down the road. I don't get it, but the three of us chatting that through is probably not going to make any difference, unfortunately, as much as we would like it to. Ian, just to finish off on the pre-season stuff that we've had so far and the games that we've seen. Like I say, 5 or 6 first teamers missing yesterday, and there's been a lot of rotation, heavy cycling through a number of different players, as you would expect to see in pre-season. Naturally, that means fringe players coming in and getting a chance to impress. We've seen some players coming back from loans. Any players that have particularly caught your eye so far?
Who are you asking me?
That's you, Ian. I
was hoping you wouldn't ask me because I've not seen a single minute of any games.
Excellent.
See, this is the pre-season of the podcast. We're just getting minutes.
I'm just building my fitness here and getting match fit again.
That's fine because it's
trying
coming
different formations and just see how it works.
It's coming up to half time and I can pull some subs on. Well, fair enough. Though. So what I was going to say was, Cedric hitting 2 goals in 3 games. Looking sharp, looking hungry. Gerrard mentioned him after the game yesterday. Glenn Middleton, obviously a good season, or a good half season at the end at St Johnstone there last year. Calvin Bassey yesterday I thought looked very, very useful, very tenacious, very aggressive. Looked very good going forward. I don't know if either of you have seen Brandon Barker, but the new hairstyle that he is sporting.
I feel for Brandon Barker because he got absolutely chastised last year for adopting the comb over. Aye. And everybody was on Twitter saying he just needs to shave it. And then when he does it, he gets absolutely chastised on Twitter. He's got a chance, lads, you know what I mean?
It's quite the shock. And it's it's a bit rich, the three of us with full thick heads of hair.
Oh, I don't know about that. I've maybe got about 5 haircuts left in me if I'm lucky.
But it's a shame for the lad because he is obviously just sort of given up the ghost on that and shaved it all off, and it caught everyone a wee bit by surprise. But look, I think Cedric Itten has a good chance of staking a claim. Obviously, we'll talk about comings and goings and the position of Mr. Morelos in a few moments. But otherwise, I think sort of players like Glenn Middleton, Jake Hastie, Jordan Jones, I can't quite see them staying the course at Rangers.
I don't think any of them will be here at the start of the season when the sort of season gets into full swing. Basically, I think those guys will either be out on loan again or will be out the door. I suspect they'll probably be on loan, which is kind of surprises me a little bit that they're getting as much time that they seem to be getting pre-season. I don't know whether that's just because they want to keep them up to levels of fitness and if they have to be played, or if for moving them on or whatever. But sometimes it seems surprising that they would get as much time as they're getting. But yeah.
But I mean, one thing that I found quite interesting, Ross, is, and Stephen Gerrard mentioned this in his post-match interview yesterday, and Jordan at the Athletic was sort of talking about it as well. The prospect of Nathan Patterson and Tavernier both starting. I think he pushed Tav up yesterday into sort of the middle of the park.
That's right.
Like he said, it was something that he's considering. So, I mean, that's quite interesting. I don't quite know how it would work. I think I'm always wary of, if you've got two great players in the same position, that you try and silly mathematics to try and find a way to get them both on the team. I think that's what Steve Clarke was guilty of with, Robertson and Tierney. It's a tough one, but it sounds quite interesting, that, and it would suggest that he rates Patterson. He obviously thinks the boy is good enough to be in that starting 11. So it's interesting to see where that goes. I think he was sort of alluding that it's not something he would use every week, but it would be something he would be prepared to use, if a game needed it or something like that. But I did find that quite interesting, that, it's crossing his mind, and I think it says a lot for Patterson because, Tav's nailed in that position. You would think, the way he's been, the performance levels he put in last season. So to hear that he's trying to find a way to get the two of them in is quite interesting.
I think the thing with Patterson is that he might not be ready necessarily to go into the first team every week ahead of Tavernier next season, but the season after that, you would think that would be the natural point where he takes over. But it's keeping him happy and progressing throughout this season is going to be the problem, isn't it? Because if he's finding he's not getting a game, he's going to be unhappy. He's maybe going to start agitating for a move or whatever. I'm not saying he would, but that's how you might think that players are going to react to that sort of thing. So I suppose the idea is try and keep him happy and keep him involved without sort of dropping Tavernier altogether at this stage, and maybe then looking ahead to the season after that, or where Patterson might be more likely to be the first choice. I can't see how they could. I don't see Tavernier playing in midfield, although he's an attacking player. I don't think he. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see him as being a natural sort of midfield player. I think he does what he does from the position that he does it in, and that's effective. But interesting though, like you say.
Yeah, and it was interesting comments from Gerrard after the game yesterday, because he very much sort of said those two players are both too good to be left out week in, week out, and that shows how highly. We know how highly he rates Patterson. The way he was talking him up to try and get him into the Scotland squad to go to the Euros, and quite deservedly, of course. And you're right. He did push Tavernier forward yesterday into a more of a winger role. The way he was talking was that it can't be too advanced. He's not going to play with his back to goal and things like that. It's very much about getting him the ball and still driving forward, and that in that way it might work as a 3-5-2 with Patterson as the furthest right of three wide centre halves, and Tavernier as more of a wing back, or in a 4-1-4-1 formation. But I think what's crucial here, because I completely agree with Ian, that it's probably not this season that we're going to see that transition of power. If nothing else, Tavernier's the captain who lifted 55. He's earned the right to that starting jersey. But what I think we could see is we'll probably have another season, a guaranteed European group stage football, right? Whether it's Champions League, Europa League, or Conference League. So we're playing European football up until Christmas, naturally expecting deep runs into the League Cup and the Scottish Cup, and a hectic league campaign as well. That's surely 60 odd games that we'll be playing this season. If you're Patterson, there is surely sort of scope for you to be playing in roughly 20 of those, I'd have thought. Maybe starting 15 or so. Given where he was 12 months ago, in that 12 months ago, a lot of us probably didn't know his name. Maybe heard of him as one of a few promising youngsters, but he really shone in the last 2 months of the last season because of Tavernier's injury. And I think when he looks at how accelerated that trajectory was, how accelerated that progression was, if he then comes into his second season as a first-team player and gets himself, let's say, 20 appearances in a 60-game season, that's good experience to then kick on and make that starting spot your own as Tavernier gets a wee bit older and a wee bit more mature. So I would hope that there is scope. I agree they're not going to play every game together, but I do think there will probably be more times that Tavernier is rested this season, because we have a very, very able deputy waiting to come in. Right, gents, before we move on to look at some of the other stuff that's going on at the moment, just a quick mention of one of our partners here at Gersnet. Very lucky to have them supporting us again for the coming season, which is footballprizes.co.uk. As you guys all know by now, they run very, very high quality raffles to buy very exclusive football merchandise in relation to Rangers. They always limit the number of entries as well, so you've got a very, very good chance of winning. At the moment, they are raffling off a signed boot from Jermaine Defoe. So it's signed, it's framed, it's very, very nicely presented. Tickets cost £4.95. There's only 99 tickets being sold, and that competition ends Friday the 23rd of July at 7:30 p.m. So far, 16 tickets have been sold, so there's 83 left to go. So plenty of time to still get involved in that. All you have to do is head over to the website at www.footballprizes.co.uk. Right, we will move on now, because tomorrow, that'll be the 19th of July at 11 a.m. It's time for the qualifying draw for the Champions League. First time that Rangers have been represented in the Champions League as a competition for many, many years now, thanks to our sort of tough last decade or so. Now, Colin, it looks like we've kind of got one of these pre-draws again, where we're drawn in a little mini group and we can only get one of a few different teams. And I think the way it'll work is that we will be paired against, Team A or Team B, because those two have to play each other in the preceding round. There's always a wee bit of confusion around this. It's not overly well publicised whenever UEFA do these mini draws, which tend to happen the day before. And I know that a couple of different sources are coming out with a few different names that we could face. It looks very much like Rangers will be facing one of the following, which is either Malmo or Helsinki, Alashkert, who I think are Armenian, versus Sheriff Tiraspol from Moldova, or Ferencvaros from Hungary and Zalgiris from Lithuania. Now, Colin, given that we are in the Champions League now, or certainly in the qualifying stages of the Champions League, to me, they don't strike me as the most sort of fearful names that we could have been drawn up against. How do you react to the teams that we could be facing there? Is there anyone that you particularly fancy?
Given the form that we've displayed in Europe over the last 2 or 3 years, or certainly since Gerrard's came to the club, I think you would have to fancy yourself against all those teams. We've came up against some pretty big names in the last 3 years, and we've came away fairly unscathed. So you've got to pay these clubs the respect that they're due. You've got to prepare properly, and they're always a wee bit, because the teams are not up and running yet. They've only got a few games under the belt, and they can be banana skins. But overall, when I saw that list, when it popped up in the WhatsApp chat earlier on, I kind of thought, that gives us a good chance to get to the playoff round, and then you're one step away, and it's probably more chance there. You'll get a trickier tie, but of the names there, I think Rangers would fancy themselves to against any of those teams. That said, you look at the St Mirren game last season, the St Johnstone game, and upsets can happen. So they've got to prepare properly. They've got to, give these teams the respect they deserve. But looking at it, you would fancy Rangers to progress against all of those teams, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. Iain, I am currently looking at potential opponents, and not to get ahead of ourselves, but I would strongly fancy Rangers against any of those sides, including Malmo, obviously a strong European side with good pedigree. If we were to get through that, I believe that we would be facing probably one of the following, which is FC Salzburg from Austria, Dinamo Zagreb of Croatia, Slavia Prague, need no introduction, from the Czech Republic, and Olympiacos of Greece. Clearly a step up in quality there, and I think probably fair to say that difficult to confidently predict our way through that tie. Given that we've had such an absence from the Champions League, what are your expectations in terms of the qualifiers?
Well, I'm not sure what my expectations are, but my hopes are that we obviously progress into the Champions League. I mean, there's an argument to say that maybe our level is the Europa League, and that's where we should be sort of aiming to be in and progressing in. We would have a better chance of moving through and going into the knockout stages. But what's the point? You're in it want to be in where the big guns are playing. You want to be playing the Real Madrids and the Barcelona, the Man Uniteds, etc. That's the level you want to be at. Even if we're not competing with them, even if we're losing games against them, we want them to be there. We want to be testing ourselves at that level. We want to put our best players on that stage as well and see how they react to it. I would really like to see Morelos playing in the Champions League. I'd like to see Kamara playing in the Champions League for Rangers, and that's why it's not the end of the world if we don't qualify, because as you say, there's two other levels that we can drop down into. It's almost impossible to get knocked out of Europe at this stage for us at the moment, whatever level we end up at. But you want to be first choice would be in that Champions League draw, because apart from I remember back to the games under Dick Advocat where the atmosphere was just unbelievable. The qualifying games, but in the group stages as well. That and through the years under Walter Smith as well. That's the level we want to be playing at. That's the pinnacle. It's not just a case of we're there and we enjoy it and like Scotland at the Euros or something, but it's you want to be able to test your players at that level and see how they react to it and whether they improve and whether they are the players we think or we hope that they are. And on a purely financial level, that it's about £30 million or something like that we could bring in. But on another level as well, if your best players do well and Rangers are we have to say are a selling club, that's the stage that they have to do well on in order to sell them for good money. That's how Celtic managed to sell some of their players over the years for more than you would have expected, because they played at the Champions League level, didn't disgrace themselves, those individual players. So the other clubs looked at them and said, well, they could do a job for us because they've played that level. So that on all those levels, there's no question that's where we want to be. Whether we'll make it or not, I don't know. And they're tough games that we'd have to play. We've proved in the past that we can get through that sort of level of competition, but you only have to look at Slavia Prague, who forever, apart from everything else, last season sort of fairly comprehensively beat us over two legs. So if that's who we end up playing against, we'll have to considerably up our game against them. But that's the level we want to be at.
No, I think the only part of that I would disagree with is that I would arguably say that Celtic players did disgrace themselves in the Champions League. I think let's not lie about it, but some must have done something right to persuade people to spend that level of money that they spent. Players. I don't know what it was, but yeah. And if the rumours about Brentford and their big marauding centre half, as the Scottish media will tell you, that Chris Ayer is, £13.5 million bid apparently been lodged, then I have no idea where that comes from.
There's a good no-look pass though.
There's a good no-look pass. I mean, I'd say it's more difficult to do a no-look pass when you're 3-0 down.
Yeah.
It takes real courage.
It takes a lot to do that, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Good on him. Right. Now, before we get on to talk about transfers in, transfers out, there's been a wee bit of activity, obviously, over the summer, with a few rumours kicking around in terms of comings and goings. One thing, Colin, that I wanted to discuss, and that I think has caught a lot of people by surprise, is this news that's kind of seeping out that Rangers are charging for media access. So reports coming out, and I think Hugh Keevins was the first one to really take pleasure in reporting this about Big Bad Rangers are now making us pay to come in and write stories, and it does seem to be true that. And I'll put this out. I have no idea if this is true or what the cost is and what the packages entail. Apparently, it's the same for fan media, but I've not even asked the question personally of Frankie, and that's not really my domain either. So apparently, when it comes to sort of big national newspapers, there's a hefty fee for them to pay in order to get access to the games, access to the manager for sit-downs, exclusive stories, that kind of thing. And I guess, unsurprisingly, Colin, it's been fairly roundly criticised by those outside of Rangers Football Club, but also causing some concern amongst the fan base. And I believe, again, a rumour, no idea if it's true or not, that it even led yesterday to Willie Vass being unable to go to the game. Willie Vass, the photographer who's attended Rangers games for 30 odd years, taking photos, went to every game along the journey on the road back to the top flight of Scottish football. Apparently he would also be caught up in this and wasn't able to attend the game yesterday. Now that obviously may have simply been nothing more than COVID restrictions and trying to limit the numbers in at Ibrox, but hard to say without being privy to the full facts. If this is true, Rangers charging, some people saying £25,000 for that media access, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts would be that don't get me wrong, the media in this country don't impress me. The print media, and there's obviously the situation with the BBC and all that. It's been an issue for a while, Rangers' relationship with certain journalists in this country and certain media outlets. That said, I don't know if I'm not convinced that this is a way to fix the problem. I don't know the reason for it. I've heard a few things as well. I've heard it's 25,000 for your sort of mainstream media outlets, and it's 5,000 for fan media. Which let's be honest, that's loose change for Frankie. But it just seems, looking at it from the outside, the only thing I can think that what they're trying to do is they're trying to control the content and and who has access to it. And I don't know if that's a good idea or not. As I said, there are certain journalists and there are certain media outlets in this country that I think are quite openly hostile towards Rangers at times. But I don't know if this is the way to fix it, to be honest with you. I think, on the BBC thing, I have heard stories that Rangers have tried extensively and on more than one occasion to fix the situation with the BBC, and it's the BBC that are the sort of the blockage on this. They just won't shift, they won't budge in their position. But charging 25,000, I don't know. It just, as a supporter, it doesn't feel good to me. It doesn't look good. It's not a good look for a football club. The sort of stature of Rangers to be adopting. Again, if there was more clarity and you understood the reasons behind it, and the club were coming out saying, "Well, this is why we were doing it," you would maybe have more of an idea to make an informed judgment. But when you're dealing with just rumour and hearsay, and it does look to be true, then I don't think it's a good look at all. I must admit, something has to be done in terms of the PR of the club, and how we try and mend the bridges and the relationships that we have with a lot of the media outlets. I don't know if this is the way to do it, if I'm being honest.
I very much doubt this isn't even an attempt to address that issue. I suspect it's something more of a commercial thing rather than an attempt to necessarily control or change the relationship with the media outlets themselves. I totally agree. I think the idea of charging, especially a figure that high, is just ludicrous. It's the wrong thing to do. Simple as that. As far as I'm concerned, it's indefensible. I can understand maybe from the club's, I'm trying to look at it from the club's point of view and thinking, well, these media outlets are coming in to Ibrox and to use our facilities and to use our content, I suppose, if you like, as in our team playing, and they're using that, and then they're maybe selling it on and they're making money out of it. So why shouldn't we get a share of that in some way? Because after all, it's our intellectual property, I suppose. But that's just not how it works. And the whole thing, like them or not, the newspapers and TV and radio and all the rest of it are the people who speak to the fans. And if you price them out, then fans are going to lose out. Now, I know that things have changed, and there's fan media, and the clubs speak directly to fans themselves. So things have changed than maybe they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. But nonetheless, we are still in an era where the media is important, and I just the idea of it is I just, whatever you think of the way the club is reported and how individuals deal with players or deal with the club and the issues around it, this isn't. I doubt it's an attempt to address it, but it isn't the way to address it. So the two issues should be taken completely separately, and I just think this is wrong, basically.
I mean, even if it is a commercial thing, Ian, which you're probably right. I mean, as you've pointed out, the club has its own internal media. You know, it's got its website. In the past, it had the Rangers News. You know, Rangers made money from their content, from their intellectual property. You know, they had the Rangers News for all those years. They've got the website. They've got Rangers TV. You know, they've got all these things that gained the club, you know, an income on their intellectual property and their media stuff. So I just don't get why they see the need to do this. You know what I mean? And it's also, I mean, the supporters across the road, you know, and I think we would probably be the same if it was the other way about. You're thinking, well, they must be skint. You know, that's what supporters are now saying. Well, if they're charging £25,000, there must be a reason behind it. Well, it's skint FC and all that kind of stuff. So it maybe arguably has a detrimental impact on the image and how people are looking at the club. You know what I mean? Because it's just a bizarre thing. I've never heard anything like it. And I mean, I know you're a journalist, so it must be the same for you. You know what I mean? I don't think you'll have ever come across anything like that.
I mean, I know, I'm pretty sure, and it's a long time since I've had to think about it, but I'm pretty sure it's not unusual for it to happen. Certainly in clubs in England, I'm sure have done it over the years. I mean, the one thing I'm not quite sure about is, you know, in terms of where the responsibilities as part of the SPFL and obviously UEFA level, I presume UEFA's accreditation and things like that override anything that Rangers would do. So they wouldn't be able to exclude people if they had a UEFA accreditation for a game, for instance. They wouldn't allow that to happen. So Champions League games or Europa League games, so they would all get in for that. So they couldn't charge for that. I'm surprised that the SPFL doesn't have some sort of rule in place for that sort of thing as well already, but maybe they do, or maybe they do and it allows it or something. I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but as it's not, I don't think it's a unique situation in the footballing world. It's just not something that's never happened in our context before, and you know, it surprises me it's happening at all. To be perfectly honest.
Yeah. I echo the pair of you. It doesn't sit right, personally. No. Charging for media access, I see what the club are going for. I disagree. I'm not sure it's a commercial thing, because I mean, if 10 media outlets, let's say, I think that's being optimistic, that 10 would pay that fee, that's £250,000. That's in the grand scheme of running a football club, I doubt that's very much in terms of revenue. No,
but what maybe... Oh, Chris just knocked the glass over. That was good. What maybe is the situation, I don't know, but presumably if you sign up to this, you have to sign some sort of agreement that the Rangers will profit in some way from if you sell on footage, because I know that, you know, some I don't know, I'm just guessing if there's other sort of ways that the club could, and it's more about controlling it rather than necessarily make money from it. They want to have more control over what images and what footage gets used and where it gets used. I mean, I remember years ago when I used to work for the Press Association, we used to want to go along and film the press conferences that happened, and this was in the days before that was quite commonplace. And basically Rangers put the kibosh on that, and that was 10, 15 years ago. They wouldn't let us do it because they had their own website and they wanted the video to be shown on their website before it was shown anywhere else. And the Press Association, we were putting it out to all the newspaper outlets, and they at that stage could put it onto their own website in the days before they had their own sort of multimedia units. So even going back that far, there's been an attempt to sort of control how stuff is disseminated, through the different media outlets. So I suspect that's possibly what it's all about, is controlling the images and controlling the footage and where it goes. But
another thing that's disappointing for me is at a time when fan media was getting closer to the club, if this figure of £5,000 is true, then that actually, maybe bar one or two, puts a lot of people at the game. I mean, recently, when Celtic announced their new manager, they had two separate press conferences. They had one for the the mainstream media, and they had a fan media conference. Now, don't get me wrong, some of the stuff that came out of that was pretty embarrassing. But you have to say, that's the thing with fan media, right? It's quite an extreme thing. You've got both ends. You've got the end where the content is good and reasonable and they're providing quality stuff, and you've got the end where it's just absolute nonsense. And a couple of questions and a couple of things that were said at that press conference were frankly embarrassing. The first question was horrific. But that said, there's people within that room who are good at what they do. They do provide good content for supporters. And if you're going to charge fan media £5,000 to gain access, then at a point when they're getting closer to the club, you're pushing the vast majority of them back again.
Yeah. Well, it's one of these things I think we're going to have to keep an eye on how it develops. It doesn't seem to have been anything sort of concrete or official from the club unless I've missed something. So a lot of rumour, a lot of hearsay at the moment. And want to see, if anything, it'll be interesting to see how, the content for fans. I mean, look, fan media is strong at the moment. Obviously, we know that we are one part of that puzzle of fan media, I suppose, and there's a lot of different ways now for fans to consume information about their club. So it'll be interesting to see if the offering for, I hate the term mainstream media, because it sort of always immediately makes you sound like a conspiracy theorist about the MSM that are printing all these horrible stories about us. But it'll be interesting to see if the content available from the mainstream media does change at all. Gents, before we finish, I sort of teased it throughout the show, but I think it's time that we take a very brief look at the state of the squad and the ins and outs. So, Colin, transfers in so far, I think the main one that we should all be, excited for at the moment is John Lundstrom. Joined the club a couple of weeks ago. Free transfer from Sheffield United, so a player of Premier League pedigree, released at the end of his contract at the end of last season. Sheffield United obviously being relegated and pitches up in Glasgow. What do you make of that signing?
Yeah, he's a player I've not seen a lot of, if I'm being honest, Ross, but having done a wee bit of research and all the rest of it since we signed him, it looks like we've got a good signing. Reading a couple of match reports today, I think he struggled a wee bit yesterday, but first game and all the rest of it, trying to find his sort of place in the side. I mean, that's understandable. He's got plenty of time. So yeah, I mean, you would have to say, I think we've spoken about this a few times on the pod. The recruitment has been impressive since Steven Gerrard turned up. The quality of players that were coming through, and Ross Wilson as well, the job that he's doing at the club. And I think it's we're signing players of the vast majority of them anyway are of a certain age, and they're players that I think Steven Gerrard thinks that he can improve. So we bring them in. It's effectively buy cheap, improve, sell high. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean that's the one thing I'm really confident with the club at the moment. When we're signing players, I'm confident that they'll fit in, because at the moment we're having a lot more hits than we're having misses. You know what I mean? It took Gerrard about 3 years to get the team up and running. He had to use as many windows as possible to bring in the players that he felt he needed. But you would have to say that I would say about 80-90% of the signings that he's bringing in are working. And you think of people like Kamara. I mean, that whole midfield, I read something the other day, like the whole I think we signed the midfield for like 90 grand or something. You know what I mean? Because everybody was free. We got Arfield free, Davis on a free. It was going through the whole thing. I think it was Jordan and the Athletic. It was going through that whole midfield. And I was like, that must be the cheapest midfield in Scotland. And a good percentage of them, you would imagine guys like Hadji and Kamara and Aribo at some point, in the next 2 or 3 years will move on, and they'll move on for a profit. So the model's good. I think the recruitment's good. I've had a wee look at. I've looked at a couple of videos of the boy Veerman, and he looks a proper player. So yeah, all looking good as far as I can see.
And Ian, on the flip side, players out. Nothing concrete at the moment. Obviously, a lot of speculation about Alfredo Morelos and Porto. I believe his agent spent some time in Portugal. Purely coincidence, I'm sure, but a lot of rumour that Porto are interested and have tabled an offer or will be tabling offers. But also some buzz around Glenn Kamara, for example. There's always talk about Yanis Hadji going elsewhere as well. Borna Barisic had an opportunity at the Euros to put himself in the shop window. Is there anyone that you're sort of particularly worried about Rangers losing in this transfer window?
I mean, I think I know that we've been sort of preparing for him to go for it feels like for the last 5 transfer windows, really, almost since the very first one that he was here. But you know, I think he's still, and it showed at the end of last season when he missed games. He's such an important part of the team, and even when he's not scoring, at the end of last season, he was still contributing in a massive way. So if he was to leave, and I recognise that eventually he probably is going to leave, he is eventually going to leave, but I mean fairly sooner rather than later, we have to have someone in place that's going to fill that gap and is going to contribute in a way that he already contributes, because if they don't, then we're going to, lose a major part of our attacking force. So I'd be really. I mean, I wouldn't hold it against him if he wants to go. I think he's contributed over the last 4 years enough to merit, or 3 years enough to merit going. But I would really be disappointed if he did, and I would hope that we would have somebody that could fill his place. I'm not sure that necessarily we would have, certainly not immediately. I think Kamara is an interesting one because, he played really well at the Euros, and he's probably, his value isn't ever going to be higher. So maybe you could look at him as a player that maybe we should be looking to sell at this window, or the next window at least, because I think his value would be at its highest point. Again, I'd rather he was staying, but if we're serious about being a selling club, and that's the model we're working on, then the reality is that's what we have to put up with. Players will leave, so the time to leave is when they're at their highest value.
Yeah, I wonder as well what the Champions League qualifiers will kind of impact. Obviously, getting to the Champions League group stages will give us one hell of a budget potentially. There's a long time left to go. The summer transfer window is a long window. And I'm sure there will be sort of twists and turns along the way. One player that I've got in mind is Ryan Kent. Again, I think he's going to be pivotal, and I think it's been reasonably quiet so far about Kent.
Yeah, but I think, again, reading some stuff over the weekend there, that the market's quite depressed at the moment because football clubs just don't have the money. That's it. You look at the situation with Barcelona; they're having to drastically cut their wages just to register some of their signings. So I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't a huge amount of exits this year, because I think Rangers will have had fees in mind for some of these players, and maybe some the clubs that are interested in these players won't be able to reach those fees at this moment, given the impact that COVID's had on finance and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't a huge amount of outwards this season.
I suppose the question is how important is it for Rangers to actually sell players? Yeah. I mean, that is it more important for the ongoing sort of stability of the club financially that we need to sell Morelos and Kent, or Morelos and Kamara, or whatever, that we need to bring in an X amount of money in transfer fees in order to progress to the next level? I don't know if that is the case or not. I don't know how, but eventually that is going to be the case. So, it may well be that we have to sell players for less than we would necessarily want. And I think fans that might, have to, just accept that we're not going to get the 25 million that we hope to get for Morelos, that we're maybe going to have to settle for 15 million or whatever. It just depends how vital it is that we sell players. The Champions League, like you say, the Champions League might make a big difference to that. If we get into that, then maybe the need to sell wouldn't be quite as great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing, Colin, that I'm going to disagree with you there is, can we really call it a depressed market when Brentford are allegedly going to pay 13 million for Chris Iain and Arsenal are spending 50 million pounds on Ben White?
Yeah, well, it does a great no-pass look, though. You know what I mean? He's worth every penny.
A no-pass look.
A no-pass look. A no-look pass, sorry. It's pre-season. This is where you get all these things out. You know,
getting out your system now.
Just getting minutes in the legs. That's
Colin's rusty ring again. Right, gents, that's taken us over the hour. So I think it's about time that we wrap it up, because if nothing else, I am about to sweat through this t-shirt.
Yeah, you do look quite hot, but not in that way.
No, cameras are on. You can all see it. So listen, a massive thank you to Colin and to Iain for giving up their Sunday nights and throwing themselves back into this new season with me. And a massive thank you as well to everyone who's listening. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and I hope you're as excited as we are about the push for title number 56. Feels very strange after all those years about talking about 55. We are now going for 56. The Gersnet podcast will be back next weekend, where we'll be taking a look at the Blackpool game and most importantly the Real Madrid game, with the podcast coming just a few hours after full-time whistle will blow at Ibrox. As I said at the start of the show, please do head over to the website at www.gersnet.co.uk to check out all of the excellent content and the friendly discussion forum there. Until next time, please do stay safe. Thank you for listening, and bye for now.